Next question is, with the increase in home shopping this year, what support can suppliers offer wholesalers for B2C selling? This is from Tom Gittins at Confex. So I know he's probably, while Confex do retail, they're predominantly more food service out of home. So I wonder whether, Mushtaq, you might be best placed to talk about this, as you've seen kind of on the ground how this has grown in recent months.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, actually. This was the biggest challenge we faced back in, say, end of March and April, when we pretty much overnight switched gear and targeted the home market for home deliveries when the lockdown started, only to find out that most of our products are very big in pack sizes and difficult to handle for a home delivery. So if and there are some issues with this as well, because what happens, I think Lotte and Tom will probably contribute to this discussion a little bit more. But what we found when it came to particular food products, suppliers also had challenges because they had very tight contracts with the retailers versus wholesalers, because something they deliver to wholesalers, they wouldn't necessarily deliver to retailers, or vice versa, purely to keep these two groups happy, both the parties happy, so that they don't sort of fight for price war or anything like that. And when a situation like that occurs, you end up that, okay, say a company X or Y have got same product, whether it's drinks or frozen food or even hygiene cleaning material. It's very difficult to convince supplier to have the same product. Now they don't want to quite say no to you that they're not going to give you those, but then they take time to reconfigure their pack size just to keep the big giant with bigger muscle buying muscles retailers happy. So I think the support in that area is quite important for the wholesalers to get into the B2C in any kind of crisis period, so that the turnaround time can be much faster. The support from the manufacturers can be a lot more faster towards the wholesaler, so that we can also chip in. And it's not necessarily always to compete with the retailers, but it's mainly in a crisis period to keep the country going. Now, if you think about it, most of the big retailers didn't have a slot available for even a whole month. Even if you wanted to go to Tesco, Sainsbury's, Ocado, Asda, anybody, you name any retailer, in March, you couldn't book a next day delivery slot. Now, there was a need for the homeowners to have their grocery supply done. We then found that gap and got in, and we were doing next day delivery. I mean, we were taking orders until 9 o'clock in the night and deliver the next day. But none of the retailers could do that. I mean, I personally, we wanted to buy things from like say Tesco and Ocado because some of those items JJ doesn't sell. I do my shopping from JJ, but then there are items which we don't. And I was looking for those, but there was no slot. I mean, I was trying in April, and until May, there was no slot available. So things like that happened. I think manufacturers need to realize that while they have to deal with the corporate politics and support wholesalers and retailers and look at who is bringing more money in, but at the same time, crisis management should be on their agenda and say, like, okay, how to then quickly give some products to the wholesalers, those who may have slots, but if they cannot have the product, they cannot deliver to the consumers as well. That's a key point.
Excellent. So I wonder if we've got somebody from one of the suppliers. So I don't know whether, say, Lottie, perhaps have you had any experience of this? How has this filtered to you, this growing trend? Have you seen anything happen?
I mean, I have to say at Red Bull, we have it a bit convenient because we mainly sell one product. And I think that means it's a lot easier for us to react to changing dynamics. So the biggest thing we've seen in soft drinks in general is the growth of multi-packs within the impulse grocery community. So we've scrambled successfully to be able to make sure as far as we can that those products are available, because we've seen a massive uptick in just the people Mushtaq were talking about. So, you know, people who want to be able to get something delivered to their home or aren't willing to go to a big box retailer due to the current crisis, that we get more of their drink at home products available in the store on their street. And certainly the independent store on my street, I talk to him every time I go in, and he had lots of new products that I wasn't used to, like large bags of flour that I sort of things that I guess Mushtaq is talking about. So it's very hard to buy bread flour for a while, but my local retailer had it. It was clearly meant for food service in its pack format, but he was selling it as a good price, and as a shopper, I was very glad to see it. But yeah, I think that it depends on you as a manufacturer, how, you know, what you're producing and in what formats. And I think it has been more challenging for some suppliers than others, but certainly we've seen as a pack format that drink at home, that consume at home occasion really grow in importance for this sector. And I hope that suppliers have been able to react to that quickly.
So I mean, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'm making sure that was actually the right button I pressed. Same as Andy, first time raising hand.
You got both hands up.
I agree with Lottie. Yes, our biggest, I guess, movement was the convenience stores going from, you know, traditionally being singles and smaller pack sizes to overnight needing larger pack sizes. Particularly within our beers, particularly within Guinness, and also switching from things like fractionals into sort of your bigger pack formats as well, which would have existed there anyway. And again, the priority for price mark pack as well, something we know is absolutely huge within convenience, is not sold within grocery. So making sure that, you know, our supply chains were ensuring that, you know, they weren't just ramping up manufacturers of the standard 1 litres for grocery, but that price mark packs were also something that was, you know, heavily prioritised, as well as bigger format packs on things like Guinness. And I think that decision was sort of flagged and raised quite early on within. I mean, obviously there was out of stocks at some points. We had constraints as manufacturers from how we could actually operate our sites, given some of the rules and regulations, and that was something that, you know, was worked through within the supply chain end. But definitely, I think, you know, moving forward, it is something that manufacturers need to prepare for. Will be sort of these massive swings, whether it be things like pack changes, whether it be staycation versus sort of travel abroad, whether it be things like you know, customers sort of flocking to their local outlets as opposed to sort of big city hubs, and ensuring that, you know, we're supporting those outlets with, you know, advice, ranging, and everything else. Given the swing in the customer demographics that will probably be seen within those sort of cities versus more regional areas.
Excellent. So Tom, have you got something to add to that as well?
Yeah, so Kerry pretty much said a lot of what I was going to mention in terms of the fact that what we saw, much same with both Lottie and Kerry, we saw massive decline in the on-the-go moments, and a lot of the sharing moments was where we were seeing people move their buy-in to, which, yeah, like the other guys, we saw maybe those particular pack formats went out of stock for a period of time because demand on them just increased exponentially. And then I think the other element actually that as a supplier we could support the wholesalers on a little bit more there is a different way to communicate to consumers to what you would do to a retailer or a restaurant. And I think that the B2C sites that are run by wholesalers, some of it still is very much a way of communicating on a B2B basis rather than a B2C basis. And the shopper journey, the movement around the platform, etc., is probably focused more around that area still. So perhaps there is the opportunity to actually, whether it be a second platform or whether it be an alternative site, and we start looking at actual landing pages would change. And so you'd log on, it would recognize you're a consumer rather than a retailer, and then that gives you a different skin that you then operate from. And that could be one way that you would allow that to happen. And then the other moment that I wonder as well, that wholesalers could support their customers with is by creating group agreements with some of the food delivery companies to allow that extra moment of the B2C home shopping moment. Because, you know, they always say where there's volume, there's power. And so go into the likes of Uber, go into the likes of Deliveroo, etc., and saying, hey, all my customers may sign up to this. What agreement could we get? And I wonder whether that could be an opportunity to provide further support there, which, again, as suppliers, we could then provide the relevant methods and ways to communicate on those platforms to the consumers again. So I don't think it's one party needs to do a lot of the work. I actually think it's more of a, especially when it comes to the restaurants and the retailers, it's probably more of a trinity approach, that the supplier, the wholesaler, and then the end retailer also has to work out how we communicate with the consumer and how we do that. And so work as a collective movement.
Excellent. I wonder, Andy, because from your perspective, obviously you've got an on-trade business as well. But have some of your customers started to do kind of more B2C delivery during this crisis? And how have you worked with them if they have?
Some have. Some were doing it locally in the traditional Arkwright model, to be honest, in terms of taking telephone orders, because they're in villages, they're the hub of the community, so they already existed. I think I just want to kind of run through this. So unlike Mustang, we don't sell business to consumer at all officially, and we've never tried to. We did look at it right at the beginning of the pandemic and went, no, let's forget that. We got enough of the day job, to be absolutely honest. We did by default sell an awful lot to consumers, because we've got what's called PBU. So if you think about the macro business in terms of builders and electricians that are entitled to a card, we've had plenty of those signed up. We had a massive rush and got hundreds more that we had to stop eventually because it was getting a bit silly, and they were detracting from our own our true business and denying our existing customers product. So we kind of round that back a bit, but by default we did have some business consumer. I think that the biggest thing we need to think about here personally is that they always said that the last 10 yards, the last 10 meters is the most expensive, which is what all the major mults have found with their online platforms, which prior to this, most of them would have been quite happily going to close them if they could have got away with it, because they were making no money. That's the same for us as well. We've got 20-ton wagons driving around delivering on pallets and in cages. We're not geared up to go and deliver that last 10 yards, and we don't want to. But neither have we got packs as mustache that actually suit what the consumer wants. But what we have got is 400 retailers who have got perfect product that those consumers want. What they haven't got is the easiest of platforms for those consumers to order from. Now, obviously, those platforms are out there now. Again, as a wholesaler, we looked to try and partner up with one or two of those platforms. Again, early on. Actually, we are just so busy. We have not got the headroom or resource to actually go and do that and offer it for our customers. But that's where the real opportunity is here. And then from that falls packs that are suitable. Because the bottom line of all this is that we really need to think about it, because I guarantee, I'm pretty confident at the moment, this is a renaissance of convenience. We were heading in one direction and one sector was dominant. It's not going to be as dominant now, because millions of people have discovered shops they didn't actually know existed, genuinely didn't know existed. Yeah. If they knew they existed, they'd never walk through the door. They've now done that. They've realised that, okay, the pricing isn't bad. It's pretty clean. Mr. Armour behind the counter is really, really nice. He's really helpful. I can get in and out. I don't have any hassle. The parking's okay. Why would I not want to go back, to be absolutely honest? So the big shop was being dead for a number of years, I think, to be honest. But with more multi-channel, we're going to see more here, and these stores are going to be trusted, and this is another opportunity that they could get involved with. But as wholesalers, and I think ultimately as suppliers, we've got to support that. So it is those platforms. That's our challenge at the moment. I'm not going to develop my own platform. We just haven't got that resource. But I need to probably partner with some of the platforms that are out there and just make it slicker, because even then, when we looked at it, there's not universality in terms of products that are stocked. So again, even for our own company stores, of which we've got a few, we investigated briefly for our own company stores, and even then it was going to be, really, it was a service more than anything else. But I can see that going forward, it could easily develop.
Yeah, just following on from Andy talking around the convenience area and the growth, that's something that I can absolutely echo, looking at sort of the year-on-year sales performance across sort of larger store formats, mid-store formats and convenience. Convenience was the only sector in consistent growth and higher growth for every single week of the lockdown period and going forward. And I think, to Andy's point about how do we almost have the extra system in place, and how do convenience stores get out there and get out there more outside of people sort of going in and visiting. One thing I noticed in my area, and sort of, potentially sort of more in city areas where on-demand platforms are heavily present, is that within the space of 3 weeks, I saw every single local convenience store in my area of London, in Ealing, on-demand platforms, on Deliveroo and Uber Eats, with their own sort of their shop front, and they'd consistently done it very well. So they'd followed sort of the guidelines that we would sort of say are best in class around having, really attractive storefronts, offering things like bundle deals to get cross-category shopping, listing at sort of more higher value items and essentials first. And I think they did a really strong job there, and we saw quite a lot of growth coming through from what was, I guess you could argue quite an untapped area. And I think moving forward, with sort of different phases of sort of health concerns, and even outside of that, to a more sort of convenience-driven landscape, I think this will be something that continues when people are seeing the benefit of ordering through the on-demand platforms for not just takeaways, but also their groceries.
So what have you seen from your perspective, Tanya? Have you seen anything change over the past few months?
I think all of the data that we've seen certainly plays to what Kerry was just saying about, convenience has won through COVID. We all know that. And the opportunity, convenience potentially is on a cusp, if it can grasp this opportunity, to really take and run with it. And somebody made the point earlier, I think it was Mushtaq, that the multiples just ran out of delivery slots. So it wasn't that they were competing head to head with the mults, they were fulfilling a new need that didn't exist because we were at capacity. So there is definitely an opportunity. I guess, without wanting to throw a bucket of cold water on this, the only thing I want to caution, and I guess it's the realist in me, is that the challenges for a convenience retailer in actually moving to a slick delivered model. So certainly partnering with people like Deliveroo makes a huge amount of sense. I mean, it's a massive opportunity. You can extend from your eating at home consumption stuff to snacks and, etc. But things like chilled delivery, and I would defer to Mushtaq and Andy on this stuff because I'm by no means an operational expert, but chilled delivery and managing inventory and enabling customers to order in the moment and get a delivery slot at a set time with a safe delivery that is fully compliant to all health and safety, and actually doing it and making money. And this is the other thing. Again, somebody made the point, the mults have been doing this for years and making no money off it. In wholesale, again, slightly sensitive, but all of the wholesalers who have failed, the large ones, have been the delivered wholesalers because it's so difficult. So, whilst there is a huge opportunity, and I stand here saying convenience sector, stand up and grab it, but actually plan and do it properly, because otherwise, it will just be a mess, frankly.
Excellent. Have you anything to add, Tom, as well?
So for me, it was just two elements, really. And one is around what you were saying in terms of the growth element. And some data I was reading, it's suggesting that actually 10% of the convenience market will be delivered via an online platform, whether it be Deliveroo, Uber, or own deliveries from locations by the end of 2021, which is a huge opportunity. So I think that's an area that we can go on. And then I think the other area that we were just talking about in terms of, it needs to be price conscious because that's what people are going after. Actually, when people are moving to these models where it's looking for the instant shop, it's more speed rather than price that they're after. It's not to say price doesn't matter, but speed becomes the first moment. I know for myself, for example, right during the midst of lockdown, when we couldn't get any of the delivery slots on the locations, we ran out of nappies, and I paid £4 more than what I would normally pay for a packet, but I got it within half an hour. And obviously you put other stuff on there because then your delivery fee makes it feel a bit more worthwhile. But I think that's the mindset, and that's the moment which is really key for the convenience market that they can tap into. That actually price isn't the biggest blocker.